Okay, I guess we'll call the meeting of the Finance Subcommittee to order. It's 5 o'clock on the 3rd of March. Alyssa, you want to do roll call?
Yep. Okie doke. Rick Hoyer.
Here.
Jamie Fields.
Here.
And Dennis Duke.
Not.
Okie doke. Back to you, Rick.
I noticed we also have a number of attendees, many which are, I can usually see, are members of the committee as well. I hope we do not have a quorum of the entire NIP online, otherwise that could cause an issue. I don't think we do, since we're 14 and there's only 8 total, and so max would be 10. So I think we're fine. I think first item on the agenda is minutes of previous meeting, which was quite a while ago. So I can't remember anything that far back anymore. So barring Jamie, you knowing something that's not right on it, I'll move we approve the minutes.
And I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I believe the next thing on the agenda, because I haven't figured out how to see people and see the agenda at the same time on this, so I'm kind of doing it from memory, and then I'll turn it over to you to walk us through.
You have a printed copy.
The next one is I believe it's spokesperson report, which there isn't a spokesperson report since nothing's happened since we went cold. So let's move on to the first agenda item. Take it away.
And actually, the next one on mine says public appearance. I don't know if anyone.
Excuse me, you're right.
Yeah.
This is public appearance items for any item, any member of the public wishes to speak on any issue that is not on our agenda, but is within the purview of the NIP. Please raise your hand on Zoom, I guess is the way, or there must be some kind of way to do it via phone too. So
Yes, from the telephone to raise your hand. I believe it's *9, but it doesn't look like anyone's calling from the phone. So
okay.
I do not see.
Yeah, since I'm not seeing any hands raised, we'll then close public comment and move on to the first agenda item.
Steve had something here.
So just to make sure, because I want to make sure we're all doing this like we're supposed to, and this is our first one. I believe that we need to make sure that we're reading the disclaimer up front for the electronic meeting.
Okay, Alyssa, you get to read.
Alyssa, can you or Tom just read that paragraph up front, just to make sure we're all compliant with our stuff. It's the first one, so we're learning. So.
Is this the Governor Newsom?
Yes.
Like on top of the agenda?
Pursuant to Governor Newsom's orders, that one. If someone could read that, that'd be great in the record.
Okay. So pursuant to Governor Newsom's executive orders N29-20 and N-33-20, and to do all we can to help slow the spread of COVID-19 coronavirus, meetings of the Monterey NCIP, Monterey City Council and its boards and commissions are being conducted with virtual electronic participation only. Before each meeting, members of the public may participate by submitting comments to engineering-admin@monterey.org until half an hour before the start of the meeting. These messages are shared with the council or relevant board or commission prior to the start of the meeting, but are not read aloud. All comments become part of the record and are made available online at https://monterey.org/submitted-comments. During the meeting, join the Zoom Gov webinar to participate or watch the meeting live, no time delay. You are all here, so I won't go through all those details. This meeting will not be broadcast on Comcast Channel 25 or streamed live on the city's YouTube channel. To watch or participate, join using zoom.gov. See you, and you're here. Thank you. Thanks, Steve. Okay.
Okay. First agenda item.
Agenda item number 3, discussion of the neighborhood and community improvement program project budget. I'm going to share my screen here. You see that, everyone?
Yes.
Good. Excellent. This is a, let's zoom in a little bit. Just a report that we've been working on the last several weeks. Just all the projects that were listed last week. I'm going to focus in a later item about active projects. But this is a summary, the financial summary of the program as it currently exists. This was pulled from the financial records on February 19th. So it's a couple of weeks old, but that's what we have. So right now, the number of active projects that are ongoing are 35. The total approved budget for all those 35 projects is $7.6 million. And the remaining budget balance of all of them are just over $2.3 million. Of the projects, there are 61 projects that are completed. So we'll be doing a future council agenda item to bring those to city council to have those closed out officially. The good news from, well, I'll go through the columns. The total project budget for all those that was approved with those 61 projects is $5.4 million. And of that, there is still almost $600,000 remaining from those active or completed projects. Do that. Last year in April on the 21st, City Council defunded a number of projects. Several other projects were deemed to be non-essential projects. So we have 17 non-essential projects. Their total budget came out to be $907,000, and the balance remaining on those 17 projects is just under $200,000, $195,000. And of the rest, there were 76 projects that were defunded last year by City Council. The projects have still been approved by NCIP, but the funding was taken and put into the city's general fund to help us through the COVID crisis. Those amounted to $7.4 million that were down. So again, that information was pulled from Eden a couple of weeks ago on February 19th. The good news from all this is that from the completed projects, there's still almost $600,000 that's available. And we have learned from the finance department recently that there will be approximately, at this point, it's an estimate, $2.5 million that'll be coming in to NCIP from the TOT tax. So that'll be revenue of somewhere in the ballpark of $2.5 million. I got an email this morning from Jordan Cups, who said that there's 4 months left in the year. So it's only an estimate at this point, but by the end of the year, we'll have a firmer hold on it. We'll have a better idea of what that actual number will be. But at this point, just in general, we're looking almost at $3.1 million that will be available after July 1st of next year for projects. So that's the big overall summary.
Do you feel that it really will be available, or will council be taking those funds?
So, yeah, so it's hard to say. The last report from finance, and it's a little bit hard to say on two fronts. One, we're not sure how it's going to go. On the other front is, if you are not aware, our finance director has decided to take a job elsewhere. We're working through a new finance director taking over. Lauren's last day with the city will be actually tomorrow. And we're working through a process to go through to that replacement. So that's one handicap we have. Right now, the last report that council received was there was an estimated 2.5 million. If reading the tea leaves on the wall, I'm not sure that that's going to go there. I think that that's what we want to portray. That's the information we have from council. I will share with you that just last week we received notice from our Army partners that they are having some budget crisis issues, and they cut one of our budgets for something that was previously not touched in our Presidio contracts. Does that impact one versus the other? I don't know. That'll be a council determination on how they work forward in that process. But it's clear we're not quite through our hardships. But this is the best data that we have that's been gone through, and we're like Tom said, as of this morning, this is what we're still getting from our finance department. What this revenue will be here. Is there guarantee? No, I can't guarantee it.
When do you? Go ahead, Jamie.
So, and I want to make sure I understand
Go ahead, Jamie.
that NIP is what we call forward funded. So the revenues being collected from 20 and 21's fiscal year are what's used for the grant process that takes place in 21, 22. So in other words, it's like we got the money in the bank before we ever hold the NIP cycle to determine how to spend it. So technically, that money will sit in the bank for a full 12 months until 22, when you have your completed voting and completed fiscal year, and it won't be used until July of 22. But it was collected from 20 to 21.
So that's different from my understanding, but I could be wrong on that. As I'm understanding it, these are the revenues that are being generated now to fund the projects that will begin as of July 1st, 2021.
Okay.
And that's my understanding, and I could be wrong on that, but that my understanding is the revenues that we're collecting right now during this current fiscal year are being tallied, and then the estimate, if our revenues are consistent to the end of the fiscal year, this would be the revenue that would be available for being spent for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2021.
Okay.
In effect, you both said the same thing.
Yeah.
Because it's being collected now to be spent, and so it's not actually going to be a year because it's a fiscal year, not a calendar year.
Correct.
Well, except that I did hear this, and this is what we're meeting about, is we're not talking about going through a complete analysis cycle, which normally would be from the fall through next spring, 22 spring, and therefore not available until 22 summer.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, and because we're already past when we would have started the process for this time frame.
yes.
I guess the other thing is, though, what could theoretically occur, and it'd have to go to the whole commission to work out structurally and how, is if we're refunding defunded projects that were previously approved, yeah, it could be very much a different process this year right now. Dealing with, determining what to use it on that was already previously approved, so, and had estimates and all the rest. So
Yeah.
I guess that's one approach that could be taken, so we can actually get them started earlier if the money is still there.
So it was a little bit confusing because there wasn't a lot of meat in our agenda, certainly, but that's item 5. What we're going to be looking for is just some kind of a recommendation that the full NCIP committee could discuss, with a recommendation of what the finance committee's thought process was. So we'll get to that part, but that we're looking for a recommendation, and the full NCIP committee will need to vote on how they want to proceed going forward. So
Absolutely, there's no way this committee's diving into that on its own.
Exactly. We're just looking for a recommendation, what you guys think, and then that'll be brought forward to the full committee. That's what number 5 is.
I said, my concern is how real are the funds before we go through and do all that work.
Valid concern.
Yeah, that which is, and I don't know if the rest of the committee will feel the same way, but I'm sure we'll hear from some of the public here on these items as well.
Yeah.
So any other questions on this report? And if not, I'll open it up to the public to speak. Okay, if anyone from the public wishes to address this agenda item, please raise your hand on Zoom. Richard Rusello. I don't know how we're gonna, Alyssa, can you unmute Richard?
I lost mine.
Don't have that. Let's see. I'm trying to pull it up.
I have to turn this off, I think.
Richard,
There we
why don't you
go.
try?
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Okie doke,
Okay.
Richard.
Oh, you're still muted, Richard.
Okay,
There we
How's that?
go.
Perfect.
Hear
Yeah.
you.
all through this COVID crisis, it seems the predominant emotion is denial. And when I see the city budget at $31 million deficit, I'm trying to understand how what I hate to do is waste people's lives and their time by sitting and making decisions on things that aren't going to happen. So I want to get some more solid financial information. I mean, the variants are about to hit us. We don't know if the vaccine works against UK or South African. From what I see, Monterey's budget is going to be impacted for over 10 years. And I want some more financial guidance before we all get together and argue about who's on first and who's on second, because this could be an endless process. What are the good projects that were defunded? What are the bad projects? Which are the ones we can't even do anymore because the world's changed? So I think this is all premature about having NCIP full meeting until we get some solid answers to how this is going to affect city services over the next year. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Richard. Actually, I think 2 agenda items from now is where it'll be the committee's recommendation on it. And anyone else wish to speak, please raise your hand on Zoom. Okay. Tammy Jennings.
Hi, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I know people are wondering about projects that were funded years ago that haven't been done. And they were funded and approved, but I'm not sure what's happening. And I don't know if this is the right time to talk about that or not.
I'll give you a quick on that. And that previous chart, we had the $7 million of projects that were basically, the money was taken away. The projects are basically sitting there with no funding, and ultimately, when funding starts up again, the commission's going to have to sit down and work out, and I think it's part of a later agenda item, how we recommend of proceeding with the full committee. But the committee will sit down and work out, okay, which are the ones that we're going to begin, first round of funding when money's back, or do we go for new ones and decide how to do it? As of right now, they're defunded. How they will come back to life is still an open question. Hopefully that helps. I know it doesn't really answer the question, but that happens to be where we're at right now with those.
Okay.
Speaking for myself, I want to see things that we voted on at some point get built. How we're going to get there when money starts flowing is going to be an interesting process.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Dwayne Peterson.
Yes, I was wondering, is there going to be a chance to get a list to fit these 4 categories of active, completed, et cetera, of the actual projects?
Yes, I have a list available that I can send out if you're interested. I'll send one to you, but we have the list that's current as of the date that we pulled the financial records, which was February 19th. So we can get that to you. Yes.
Okay, that'd be helpful. Thank
All the
you.
projects.
Okay.
Tom, let's make an effort to post that online as well.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Yes. Yep.
Jean Rapp. Go ahead, Jean. I think you need to.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I agree with Rich that we don't want to be wasting a lot of our time and staff time. And yet, I think we need to get together and talk as the committee about the immense frustrations when staff determines the order rather than the vote of the committee, and how frustrating that is, and how do we want to handle that as residents in a communication to the city, because that's a huge waste of time to be on the commission, get things passed, and then see them done not in the order that they were prioritized. So for that reason, I'd like us to meet, that may not be even a question on the table, but I would consider that useful. Yes, if the money's going to be taken away, everything's a waste of time. But at some point, we have to deal in advance of having money with that chronic frustration of not really being in control of the prioritization. Thanks.
Thank you, Jean. And I think there's a lot of reasons for it both ways. And I think it's time to have another discussion about it once we've got a meeting set up at some point here in the future. There any other members of the public? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. There's no action on this item. This is just informational, correct?
Correct.
Okay, let's move on to
Yes.
the next agenda item.
Next one is discussion of neighborhood and community, well, I'm going to call it NCIP project, active projects. And let me share my screen again.
So these are ones that survived the funding cuts, have not yet been completed, and are under construction or yet to be under construction. So it's those 35 projects.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, and let me zoom in a bit too. So I'll just kind of scroll through. They're all at varying stages. And there's the contingency account, which is not exactly a project. And if anyone has a question about any specific project.
So some of these have not begun construction at all. Others have.
Correct.
Can you actually just go through them quick and say,
Sure.
whether it's yet to be done or it's under construction, just so the public also has a chance to see?
Yes, the Del Monte Beach circulation study is it's in design at the moment.
Okay.
The traffic calming in Del Monte Grove Laguna Grande. There's also there's no construction with that as well. The historic master plan for art it's in, again, design stage. Contingency is just the account where the excess funds are. The boardwalk repair sand mitigation project is something that Parks is working on, but that's, again, it hasn't started construction. Solicitor Park Field, the renovation, I believe that one did have construction with it years ago, but there's like outstanding, I think it's an ADA restroom that has to be completed with that one. So it's right now it's in design to try and figure out how to complete it. Montecito Park entry and seating, we're down to getting tiles for that. So that is in process. Street tree replacements is in process. Pine Street 800 drainage is in construction right now. The Colton Hall ADA upgrade is in design as we determine what the next steps for that project will be. Mar Vista reconstruction design work is ongoing. We're discussing inside within the office within the last couple of weeks just about which components of that to bring toward construction. Hawthorne Irving curb extension is under construction right now, as is Hawthorne McClellan curb extensions. They are scheduled to be complete with construction in the next several weeks. Sloat Avenue, Fifth Street lighted crosswalk is something that we're beginning to act on within the last couple of weeks. So that will be hopefully under construction in the next several months. Casa Verde, Del Monte intersection improvements is in design. That's a big project that's scheduled, I believe, currently to be complete. The design will be complete at the end of this year. The Aeneas Bridge restoration project is still a design. In design, Casa Verde Rec Trail crossing is a portion of the Del Monte Casa Verde intersection. So that's in design through this year. The Lighthouse EIR preliminary is also in design. The Fisherman Flats traffic calming plan, I believe the plan is done. We have to bring it to council to finalize that one. The citywide bike lane improvement plan is in design. Casa Verde, Helvick, Portola, McNear intersection improvements. That project, the construction is complete and we're closing it out. Via Del Rey, Herman, right turn elimination. There's a PG&E service that we need to close that project out. El Dorado radar speed sign is in the process of,
That's the one where the sign was there, then it disappeared and has yet to reappear.
yeah, that was a defective sign. So I guess we're in the process of replacing it. North Fremont Bike. The North Fremont Bike pedestrian improvement from Casanova to Canyon Del Rey. That is in design. We're working toward completing that right now. We're doing some underground monitoring last week. The sports center upgrades is, there are several projects that we're going to attempt to do, but it hasn't begun yet. Citywide greenbelt fuel reduction and tree removal is ongoing. The Kona tree study is ongoing. Emergency operations center upgrade is in design. Colton Hall restoration preservation, again, we're looking at what to do moving forward. The citywide dog amenities will be a design project. Laguna Grande Park playground equipment. I think this is a separate one. I've got more research to do from what the project that was completed last, about a year ago or last summer, which was for artificial turf down there. But this is a different, like a next phase on that one. Pearl and Figueroa Street intersection is in design. David's Davide Spencer Street curb extensions is also in design right now. The Mar Vista traffic calming, this I believe is well, there are two portions of this project. One is design and the traffic calming plan, which I'm guessing is this one, phase one. And there's another one that I believe is on hold, which is the actual construction, which was partially funded for that. And then the Fremont Monterey Corridor traffic signal is also in design. So a lot of work going on in design. There's a few that are under construction, but mostly it's design work.
Okay. Jamie, do you have any questions?
I was looking at it and I wonder if there's some little bit of cleanup that can even occur on this list, but nothing material. Seems like a lot of these are fairly new projects, so the design status seems reasonable.
Okay. Are there any members of the public who have any comments they'd like to make at this point on these items? Jean Rash.
Thanks, Rick. Well, if something, just a point of clarification, if something is ongoing, I'm asking about the tree study, which is
Mhm.
only $15,000, but incredibly important to the city. Can we find out how that's going?
Yes. So that's the parks, and I will get in touch with Louis and ask, and I can get back to you on that, Gene.
Thanks. Great.
Yes, yep.
Any other members of the public who wish to make a comment, ask a question? Richard Russello.
I'm sorry. I've been working on the tree study for a couple of years, and we just had a joint meeting with the city manager, forester, and the mayor. And we're trying to get it going. I'm trying very hard. It's just very, very slow process.
Thank you,
That's
Richard.
all I have.
Any other members of the public? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Which is number 5, and this is kind of the big one, I think, tonight. Discussion recommendation of refunding NCIP projects. And this is what Steve was alluding to earlier. Just we would like to know, staff would like to know what the finance committee, if there's any plan or something that we could take looking forward. Go ahead, Steve.
So yeah, just to try to tee up the conversation for the community and for the board. You know, it was a monumental item that happened in defunding projects, never happened before. We don't know how to respond to it. The thought process was get together the finance committee, identify where we're at with this group, and try to figure out if there's a way that we can at least provide some recommendation to the overall committee, just looking simply at the numbers. So what we want to do is kind of foster a discussion with you all. You know, there's several options on the table. I'm just going to say just a couple that might happen. You know, we have $3 million or so. Hopefully that will come to NCIP. Do we just go through a process for the ones that have already been approved and rank those by how we want to go? Do we do a new vote with the new, with revised dollar totals for each one of those projects? They've already been approved once, but maybe NCIP committee in general ranks them. I don't need you guys to rank them today. That's not the point. I'm just trying to figure out a process or potential with that. But maybe that's one way. Another way is to have a modified system where we open it up for new projects as well as old projects, and go through a quasi-normal season with somehow incorporating the already approved projects in. Really, it comes down to what does the committee see as the best way to move forward. This is certainly something that we understand, as I mentioned before. We don't expect you folks to make, the finance committee to make a decision on behalf of the entire group. We're just looking to get your thoughts that we can then give to the NCIP committee, looking at the financial area, and just have the conversation started. We are just here to listen and try to figure out what you guys are thinking, what the community is thinking, and trying to breach this conversation, approach the subject, and figure out what's the best way to move forward. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you guys.
From my standpoint, I think a first question the committee will have to answer is, do we do new projects or only focus on the defunded ones until those are gone? That's a first question for the committee to decide on. And then based off of that, we'll then determine, okay, what process are we going to use to decide on what priority is for bringing back projects, if that's the case. I mean, and there's lots of different ways that could be done. I think no matter what, we're going to want to make sure numbers are real on projects. So, if something was funded 7 years ago and hasn't been done, is that still a real number? And if not, what's a more real number, so that we don't get into, we say we're going to do these and then there's not money to do it. And then, that whole aspect. So, do we need to fund more to it? So I would think, again, this is totally up to the committee as a whole. We'd want to look at some way of prioritizing the ones to be done in a way that allows us to get as much as possible done as fast as possible. So yeah, I would think if there's economies of scale of one type of project and there's 2 or 3 and we could have them all be built the same time frame, it might make sense. But again, at the end of the day, that is up to the committee. I mean, that's my 2 cents. Jamie probably has 10 cents to put in.
Yeah. So, interesting. My perspective from a finance side is I don't want to spend another dime on this just to have it go down a hole.
Mhm.
And so I would not recalculate the costs on any of these. I've already got a reserve set up because I knew the costs were wrong. And it's the concept inside the projects that at this point in time, we're asking about to ourselves. So I would save the money on the engineering and leave the costs and leave the reserve. But, and to Richard's point, hey, how can you make plans when you don't know? I would turn it around the other way. I think we're going to need to make plans because we're not going to know. So I think we just make a plan that says it may be this year, some of it may be this year, or maybe none of it is this year. And so to what Rick was saying, I think a process of prioritization is important, and we'll just have to let the committee know it won't be tied to any specific level of funding. And that allows the city council to refund as it has room in its budget without having to redo the entire analysis on the CIP side. And one other thought that just really jumped out at me, 76 is nothing. We have had 180 projects on the wall. So when it comes to prioritizing 76 projects, I think the committee's experienced in that and could do that. So that's not impossible for them to put their attention to it. And then lastly, I would enjoy the ability to go back to my neighborhood and get input on all the projects that are there. Perhaps they have a different vision. If we were reprioritizing, I would bring that information back to the committee. So
I think it's a good point. And in effect, we could do, like we do funding, but it's just setting the order of priority of doing it based off of the, the first 10, next 10, and so forth, and in order. But
Yep.
yeah, and I agree. I think some of the projects should go back, or they should ask their neighbors of, which of these are priorities within, because there are things that could have been high priorities in 4 different years. Well, in the scheme of things, which is now the highest priority.
Exactly. And I considered the point that Steve made, or that you made actually, Rick, about, well, do you put some together? And I think we spent a lot of time in the last few years putting things together for economy of scale. And I think there's a lot of random things that maybe didn't get attention because we were so focused. So I'm like done with that. I think we should just figure out what's important to our community. And then maybe we have an ongoing meeting that says, all right, after the last year of nothing's happening, these drop off now, keep going. After the last year, these drop off, keep going, and work it down. At least that's kind of the way I would view it.
Yeah. I think let's go out to the attendees, and I already see one hand up, I'm assuming, for this item. Tammy Jennings.
Yes, hi. I would definitely like to say no new funding for new projects. The projects that have been approved and funded, definitely prioritize those until they're paid and done, and then start from there. That would be my vote as a citizen of Monterey.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. Richard Russell.
You're muted, Richard.
If you look at the list of defunded projects and you look at the people that were on NCIP that invested years and thousands of hours of time in community meetings, add in all the people that testified, all the meetings that we normally have, you add in the Parks and Rec Commission, the Planning Commission, the City Council. When there's 100 projects on the wall and you argue for your project because you have neighborhood meetings, which we haven't done in 18 months in Kona, where we had all that input and there are 100 projects on the wall. You come up number 2, number 3, and then you have a new meeting, new person said, well, I don't like that project. Let's start all over. Those are the things where you waste human lives and the time and the volunteerism that's involved. Yes, the world's changed, but we have to be able to get to our residents in our neighborhoods to talk to them. We haven't been able to do that. And I will tell you, in the last 18 months, at least 25% of our houses have sold in Kona, and I got new people now. So it is a very complicated subject that I don't want the erase culture and the cancel culture to go in and erase all the hours of work we put in. So this is a lot deeper subject than the surface that we're putting on it here. I don't want to take projects 10 at a time. It's too complicated. I need to touch base with the people that did this in the beginning to find out what's important, what's not important. So I want to guarantee we have the money there before we make decisions, because in 2 years, Jamie, there may be a different person in your seat and a different person in my seat. So I don't want to waste time. I want to know that we really got a budget before we start making priority decisions, because my estimate is there's going to be new people making those priorities, not us.
Okay, Jean, Rosh? And I saw your hand go up, Steve. So when we come back to committee and stuff.
Thanks. I think that a lot is riding on this decision. And I will admit, I feel very strongly about it. The whole integrity of the process is going to further disintegrate if the work that we've done is disregarded and thrown away for reasons, for any reason other than something that would be glaringly obvious to all of us. I worry, I have a real deep fundamental worry that if NCIP continues to be as frustrating and dysfunctional as it's been, we won't get the best representatives who will do the work. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but why would we continue to, as Rich says, put in all these hours if it doesn't mean anything? So I would strongly be inclined to negotiate for honoring the work that's been done and keeping the priorities as they historically have already been voted on, which I think is what Tammy said, and I think is a version of what Rich is saying, as long as we have some money someday. Thanks.
Thank you, Jean. Any other member of the public? Okay, seeing none. Steve, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to help clarify to the audience and to the board themselves, something that I should have mentioned when I first talked the discussion. In the past, when we did NCIP, we always strive to have the approval happen with the city's budget. That was always our goal. Because of the strange times we're having right now and how this process is being started, it's very almost certain that this process, whatever we decide to do to move forward, if the funding is there, would happen post the city's adoption of its regular budget. In grand terms, we would know in June whether the NCIP is going to be funded or not. In grand terms, working with finance, I gave them a projection that by the time we work through a process, we wouldn't see something that would go to them for approval until September timeframe. And that's grand terms. I'm not putting any timetables on anybody, but at least some of the conversation that's happening right now is are we going to waste our time? Is it going to be money? I don't know. We won't know until the city actually adopts that budget. But I want to remind the public that we are not at NCIP tied to the city's adoption timeline. The money will stop for that fiscal year, but the actual decision on how it's going forward and prioritized, it can happen a month following the adoption of the budget, 2 months following the city budget. We have some time where there to make sure we're not wasting our time. I just want to get that out to the group.
Yeah, I think from my perspective and from what I'm hearing too, I'm agreeing with all the public I've heard. And I think it's going to be a long and potentially contentious meeting deciding how we're going to move forward. And I don't want to have everyone having to go through all that until we know we have funds. That's personally from my standpoint. Now, I think one thing we do need to take into account, and hopefully, so for you all are aware when we come to that time, is we're going to want to know where in the process, what was the number that the project was voted on? You know, was it the first priority in the first round? Was it the first priority in a fourth round? Because I could envision doing a thing where you're dealing with everything that was funded, passed in the first round of every year is in the first group, because that was the priorities in those years. I mean, there's a lot of different ways we could look at this, but I think I feel strongly we need to honor what was done before. Now, if there's a thing that because of major changes have happened in the city, the world, or whatever, it makes no sense. I mean, I'm sure it'll get brought up, but you have different people at different times. And at the time it got funded, there was a desire for it and a want, and to a degree of where it got funded that year. It gives a feeling of how important it was to the original people, which I think personally, we're going to want to take into account. But again, it'll be ultimately the decision of the commission of how we're going to proceed. And it will be it could be a short meeting or a real long, complicated one. I have no way of knowing.
Yeah, interesting point. I should clarify. I would envision 76 projects are on the wall at the beginning and 76 projects are on the list at the end, and no projects are thrown away. I was just thinking of, gee, if a road has been torn out, there's no reason to repave it. That's all I was referring to. So I would never take away an approved project, because I feel just like you, we worked our tail off to get those right. And so here's an interesting thought I just want to throw out. The construction of the projects up to now has never been prioritized. So it doesn't matter whether we thought it was important or not. We had no say, and some of the stuff that was important still isn't built. So, what we're actually suggesting is something new and more empowering for the committee than it's ever had before. So, because it was kind of whoever called the most and what was convenient and so on.
And we've heard Gene Rash's frustrations on that score, which I think we all share to a degree. I understand some of the logic behind some of the things, but there's other ones where it didn't make a whole lot of sense too. So yeah, I mean, this is definitely where, because we're not going to be able to do all of them, there'll have to be a pot of money and there'll need to be a way of deciding which are the first ones.
Yep. And then I think that I feel like the timing of the budget and the approval answers the question of, is this the right time? Because I do also agree that an enormous amount of time has been given to this, and I hate to spend more, but I do think prioritization does have to occur. And I do think if it gets done, it can allow things to start to move again whenever the city is ready. So.
But I agree. I think it has to be done. I said I hesitate, given how uncertain the finances of the city are, to at this point spend the time until we really have a better idea. No, yeah, we're not going to know how much necessarily until the time frame to do. And I kind of want to see all of a sudden see money flowing before we start spending the time. And yeah, we go through all the thing and then, oh, by the way, all the money's gone. So no. And then we're going to have to revisit those priorities again a year later.
Exactly. So I think the interesting thing I hear from today and from everything is that the number one is everybody wants the old stuff done first. They don't want to insert new. So there you go. So number two, there's probably a leaning towards a prioritization. And so as opposed to the randomness. And that's what I've heard over the past year as well. So that seems like those are some clear takeaways.
Okay. Well, Steve and your team, do you have a feedback feedback to understand where.
No, I think that, and hearing from you guys in the community, it helps a lot. I think that one of the things that is going to be helpful for us, and I think it's probably appropriate to have a full NCIP committee meeting just to talk about status and steps going forward as to when we begin this process. I'm not going to put you guys on the spot and say we need to have a meeting later, or I want to get the entire NCIP committees to weigh in about when is the appropriate time to start this process and what information would be important to help you determine if that's the decision of the overall committee to prioritize those projects, those 76 projects. It will take time, and we want to make sure we're putting it time effectively to identify it through history when it was approved and so forth. It's there, it's in the records, we can find it. And if that's an important thing for everybody, by all means, we'll put that together, and that will be part of the parameters as we describe those projects. As I don't really have a vision. I jump to conclusions a lot. I'm not mine. I'm kind of like Jamie. I picture 76 projects on the wall. I picture some kind of a description to remind people about what the projects were. Paper handouts that go to the members, and they go back to the communities, and they can get there, and then coming back to a vote similar to that. I don't know that. It's just, like I said, I jump to conclusions sometimes too quickly. It's not my decision, never is, but we just want to make sure that we're getting the tools.
Could be that route. It could be a more technical route
It
where
certainly could be.
as a committee, we say, okay, all number one priorities from each year are the first, then we go by how it was voted on the time frame and until the money's gone. So there's not we're only going to look at if there's anyone has real heartburn about a project because it does not make sense anymore.
Mhm.
Yeah, but otherwise it could be a very technical approach where it's based off of the priority of how it was approved originally.
Right.
And it steps through.
And I'll throw out one more thing to you, because I was thinking about this. We had a project for resurfacing of the playground. So, the city might come in and say, you know what? We think that can hold on for 2 more years or 1 more year. And so there's other bits of information you can start to filter in, but that could be a huge task to build that kind of information flow. So I'll throw that out, but I'm not necessarily suggesting it.
Yeah. Okay. I think that was the last item on our agenda, correct?
It is, yes.
Okay, then in which case, barring any other needs or questions related to this last agenda item, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
We have the NCIP committee member comments and then.
Oh, okay. Yep. Jamie, any comments?
Actually, I do have a comment. Normally this time of year, we'd be looking at the allocated overhead. And so do keep in mind, if we get together and talk about funding, we'll have to talk about allocated overhead and charges or costs that are borne by this committee. So it has no money now, so that's not an option.
There couldn't be any because we haven't had a program, so.
Yep.
And I have a feeling it will have to wait a little bit since we don't have a finance director.
There you go.
Yeah. I have no other comments other than I think, I said my druthers is our next meeting be after we know what the budget is. And I do want to make sure we get out to all the commissions, what are the different projects that were, just a reminder so they know what was still in process, what was the ones that, those different categories you had, so everyone knows for sure. You already said you were going to be doing that, so that's great.
Yes. So then just one other fine point question. Typically in the past, when we have normal meetings, we would bring the list of projects that were completed to the NCIP before it goes to council. The projects that Tom was talking about, the 600K in projects that's going to go back to the fund. It's probably not part of the meeting, but do you anticipate that would be something that the NCIP would get together for that and maybe just get some broad brush discussion?
I think you need to distribute it out to all of us. And that way everyone's got it. They can review it with, whatever methodology in their neighborhood they're doing things, just so everyone, and especially representatives, have the ability to answer questions.
Right.
Because I don't think there's necessarily a whole lot of clarity over what was still going to get built versus what was, be funded.
No, exactly. They probably should have waited. This is not really part of this purview, but you as the chair of that committee as well, I wanted to get your
Yeah.
input on that. It's
Yeah.
really what kind of falls in. So,
I think that the whole committee needs to see that. Okay. All right, we are adjourned.